"Look what the cat dragged in," sneered Corporal Jake Morrison as he watched the petite figure step off the transport bus at Camp Pendleton. At barely 5 feet 2 inches and weighing maybe 115 pounds soaking wet, Elena Rodriguez looked more like she belonged in a college classroom than a Marine Corps training facility. Her olive skin glistened with nervous sweat in the California sun, and her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun that somehow made her appear even smaller. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The group of seasoned Marines gathered around Morrison erupted in laughter. Staff Sergeant Mike "Tank" Patterson, a mountain of a man at 6'4", with arms like tree trunks, shook his head dismissively. "Someone's gonna get themselves killed trying to play soldier," he muttered, loud enough for the new arrivals to hear. Elena kept her eyes forward, her weathered duffel bag slung over one shoulder as she joined the line of fresh recruits. But something about her posture caught the attention of Master Sergeant Daniel Hayes, the grizzled instructor overseeing the intake. While the other new arrivals fidgeted nervously or craned their necks to take in their surroundings, Elena stood perfectly still, her breathing controlled and measured. What none of them knew was that Elena Rodriguez had been keeping secrets her entire life, the hidden background growing up in East Los Angeles. Elena had learned early that size didn't determine survival. Her father, Miguel Rodriguez, was a former Mexican Special Forces operator who'd immigrated to the United States after a covert operation went sideways, forcing him into exile. Unable to discuss his military background due to classified operations, he'd taken work as a mechanic while secretly training his only daughter. "La fuerza no viene del cuerpo, mía," he would tell her during their backyard sessions that began when she was 7 years old. "Strength doesn't come from the body. It comes from the mind and the spirit." Every morning before school, Elena would join her father for what neighbors assumed was simple exercise. In reality, Miguel was teaching his daughter advanced hand-to-hand combat techniques, weapons handling, and tactical thinking that most special operations soldiers never mastered. By age 16, Elena could disarm a grown man in seconds and think strategically under pressure that would break most adults. When local gang members finally cornered her outside her high school, demanding she carry drugs for their operation, Elena's response became neighborhood legend. The 3 men, each outweighing her by at least 80 pounds, found themselves unconscious on the pavement within 30 seconds. Security cameras captured the encounter, showing Elena's fluid movements as she systematically dismantled her attackers. Without breaking stride, Miguel made the decision that would change both their lives. Elena needed to disappear into the military, where her skills could be refined and her talents channeled toward something greater than mere survival. Harassment campaign. Elena's first weeks at Camp Pendleton were a masterclass in enduring systematic humiliation. The harassment began before she'd even received her gear. During equipment distribution, Corporal Morrison made a show of holding up the smallest uniform sizes available. "Think these will fit you, princess?" he asked, dangling the fatigues in front of the assembled recruits. "Or should we check the children's department?" The psychological warfare intensified during mealtimes. Elena would sit alone while groups of male recruits speculated loudly about her presence. Diversity quota, one would suggest. Political correctness run amok, another would add. Just waiting for her to wash out so we can get back to real training. Even Staff Sergeant Jennifer Walsh, one of only 3 female instructors at the facility, pulled Elena aside after the first week. "Look, Rodriguez," Walsh said, her tone mixing sympathy with pragmatism. "I admire what you're trying to do here, but this isn't about proving a point. These men need to trust their teammates completely in combat." Elena nodded respectfully. "Understood, Staff Sergeant. I just want the chance to prove myself through performance, not politics." The first shock, the first major evaluation came during the combat fitness test. a grueling assessment that separated serious candidates from those merely going through the motions. Elena's small stature became apparent immediately during the ammunition can lifts. While larger recruits hefted the 90-pound cans with relative ease, Elena had to use perfect form and technique to complete her repetitions. Corporal Morrison circled her like a predator, counting her reps with exaggerated slowness. 17:18. Come on, princess, don't give up now, he taunted as Elena's arms trembled with effort. What he didn't notice was that her breathing remained controlled, her form never wavering despite the apparent struggle. The 3-mile run in full gear would become the stuff of base legend. Elena started near the back of the pack, her shorter stride seemingly putting her at an immediate disadvantage. For the first mile, she maintained a steady pace while larger recruits surged ahead, many talking confidently about their expected finish times. By the second mile, several front-runners had begun to fade, their early enthusiasm meeting the reality of carrying 60 pounds of gear in desert heat. Elena continued her methodical pace, passing struggling candidates one by one without apparent effort. The final mile became a revelation, as Marines who had mocked her during the first weeks began dropping out or slowing to survival pace. Elena shifted into a higher gear that seemed to come from nowhere. Her breathing remained controlled as she systematically passed every remaining runner, finishing the course with a time that placed her in the top 5% of all candidates tested that year. Master Sergeant Hayes, who had been timing at the finish line, stared at his stopwatch in disbelief. Rodriguez, where the hell did that come from? Elena's response was characteristic in its simplicity. Training, Master Sergeant. The escalation, rather than earning respect. Elena's performance seemed to intensify the campaign to prove she didn't belong. During hand-to-hand combat instruction, Morrison began using Elena as his primary demonstration partner, claiming it would help the other recruits understand techniques more clearly. The thing about combat, Morrison explained to the assembled group as Elena stood beside him on the training mat, is that enemies won't go easy on you just because you're small or different. Without warning, Morrison grabbed Elena in a bear hug from behind, lifting her off her feet with crushing force. So what do you do when someone bigger and stronger has you helpless? Elena's response was so quick and precise that most observers missed the exact sequence. Using Morrison's own momentum against him, she shifted her weight and struck specific pressure points that caused his grip to release involuntarily. As he stumbled forward, off balance, Elena pivoted and swept his legs, sending the much larger Marine to the ground while she landed in perfect defensive stance. The training area fell silent, except for Morrison's labored breathing as he pushed himself up from the mat, his face flushed with embarrassment and rage. Elena stood calmly, no triumph in her expression, simply waiting for the next instruction. Lucky shot, Morrison muttered. But his authority had been visibly shaken. Staff Sergeant Patterson decided to take a more direct approach. During weapons training, he assigned Elena to the most challenging rifle course, one typically reserved for advanced Marines preparing for specialized roles. Let's see how the little girl handles real Marine equipment, Patterson announced, drawing attention from other training groups. Several instructors gathered to watch what they assumed would be Elena's public failure. Elena accepted the rifle with practiced familiarity, checking the weapon's condition with movements that spoke of extensive training. As she settled into the first firing position, her breathing pattern changed subtly, becoming the controlled rhythm her father had taught her. Years earlier, the first shot struck dead center of the target at 200 yards. The second and third followed with mechanical precision. As Elena moved through the course, transitioning between positions and engaging targets at varying distances, a hush fell over the assembled observers. By the time she completed the course, Elena had achieved a perfect score, something that typically took Marines months of additional training to accomplish. Patterson stared at the target sheets in stunned silence. while whispers rippled through the crowd of instructors and recruits. The final challenge, the breaking point, came during the final combat assessment. Corporal Morrison, desperate to salvage his authority after weeks of being outperformed by someone he'd dismissed as weak, decided to make Elena's final test a public spectacle. Since Rodriguez here thinks she's ready for real Marine duties, he announced to the assembled company, let's give her a chance to prove it against some actual Marines. The challenge Morrison proposed was unprecedented. Elena would face 3 seasoned Marines in successive combat scenarios. The first would be hand-to-hand combat, the second weapons handling under pressure, and the third a tactical leadership exercise. Staff Sergeant Patterson, Master Sergeant Hayes, and several other senior instructors gathered to observe what they expected would be Elena's final humiliation. The first challenge pitted Elena against Sergeant Rick Valdez, a combat veteran with 2 tours in Afghanistan and a reputation as one of the best hand-to-hand combat instructors on base. Valdez outweighed Elena by nearly 100 pounds and possessed the kind of practical fighting experience that typically overwhelmed theoretical knowledge. As the 2 Marines faced each other on the training mat, the assembled crowd grew silent. Elena stood relaxed but alert, her breathing controlled, and her stance deceptively casual. Valdez circled her like a predator, looking for the best angle to end the match quickly and decisively. When Valdez finally attacked, his movement was explosive and practiced, designed to overwhelm Elena with superior size and strength before she could implement any technique. What happened next would be analyzed and discussed at Camp Pendleton for years to come. Elena's response combined elements of her father's Mexican Special Forces training, street fighting techniques learned in East LA, and advanced martial arts that few Marines had ever encountered. She redirected Valdez's attack with minimal effort, using his momentum against him while striking pressure points that immediately compromised his balance and coordination. The entire encounter lasted less than 10 seconds. Valdez found himself on the ground, temporarily paralyzed by precise strikes to nerve clusters that Elena had learned to target years earlier. As he struggled to regain feeling in his limbs, Elena stood calmly beside him, ready to provide assistance once the demonstration was complete. Master Sergeant Hayes stepped forward, his expression mixing disbelief with growing understanding. What the hell was that? Elena helped Valdez to his feet with genuine concern. Pressure point manipulation combined with leverage techniques, Master Sergeant. Nothing permanent, but effective for temporary incapacitation. The second challenge involved weapons handling under stress. Elena was required to disassemble, clean, and reassemble 3 different weapon systems while under simulated enemy fire, then demonstrate accurate shooting with each weapon at various distances. Elena's performance was flawless. Her weapons handling showed familiarity that went far beyond basic training. Her movements under pressure remained controlled and efficient, and her marksmanship achieved scores that placed her among the top 1% of all Marines tested. Final challenge would become legendary at Camp Pendleton. Elena was given command of a simulated patrol and required to lead a team through a complex tactical scenario involving enemy contact, casualty evacuation, and strategic decision-making under extreme pressure. Her team consisted of the same Marines who had mocked her arrival months earlier, including Morrison and several of his cronies. Elena's approach revealed strategic thinking that exceeded most officers with years of additional training. She analyzed the terrain, assessed enemy positions, and developed a tactical plan that accomplished all objectives, while minimizing risk to her team. When the exercise concluded with complete success and 0 simulated casualties, the assembled instructors found themselves facing a reality they hadn't anticipated. The revelation and transformation. Master Sergeant Hayes called Elena to his office that evening. Rodriguez, I've been in this Marine Corps for 22 years, and I've never seen anything like what you demonstrated today. Where did you really learn those skills? Elena took a deep breath, deciding it was time for partial honesty. My father was Mexican Special Forces Master Sergeant. He taught me everything he knew before I enlisted. Hayes nodded slowly. That explains a lot. The question now is what we do with someone of your capabilities. Word of Elena's performance spread throughout Camp Pendleton like wildfire. The tiny woman who had been mocked and dismissed had systematically defeated some of the base's most experienced Marines in their own specialties. Corporal Morrison approached Elena the next morning, his swagger replaced by genuine humility. Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you, and I let my pride make me act like an ass. Elena nodded graciously. We all make mistakes, Corporal. What matters is how we learn from them. Within a week, Elena received orders transferring her to Marine Force Reconnaissance Training, the Corps' elite Special Operations Unit. Her performance at Camp Pendleton had caught the attention of senior officers who recognized her potential for specialized missions. On her final day at basic training, Elena stood before the same group of recruits who had once mocked her arrival. Master Sergeant Hayes addressed the formation with words that would become part of Camp Pendleton tradition. Marines, you've just witnessed something extraordinary. This woman proved that strength comes not from size or bluster, but from skill, determination, and honor. Some of you learned that lesson the hard way. Remember it well. As Elena boarded the transport that would take her to her next assignment, she touched the small photo of her father she kept in her pocket. Miguel Rodriguez had taught her that true warriors aren't measured by the size of their bodies, but by the size of their hearts and the precision of their actions. The tiny woman, who had been dismissed as a mistake, had proven that in the United States Marine Corps, heart and skill trump everything else. Her story would inspire countless other recruits who faced their own mountains to climb, proving that sometimes the most unlikely heroes achieve the most extraordinary victories. Elena Rodriguez had earned her place among America's finest warriors, not through luck or politics, but through the simple demonstration that true strength comes from within. In a world that often judges by appearance, she had shown that the most dangerous opponents are often the ones you underestimate. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.